Well, Donald Trump insists the U.S. and Iran are very close to reaching a deal and said the Islamic Republic had agreed to hand over its enriched uranium. New talks could resume as early as this weekend. Before that, though, France and Britain will chair a meeting on a post-war plan to secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And that's a mission that would exclude the U.S. and Iran, at least for now. While French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are leading the discussion, dozens of countries are taking part. Kara Scarlin reports from the Élysée Palace.
Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and President Emmanuel Macron, who greeted each other a little earlier in this courtyard behind me, are chairing this conference, echoing, for example, the coalition of the willing, which the two countries are leading on Ukraine. Otherwise, there are about 40 nations participating in this conference. It's a hybrid format because there are the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who will be here in person. Otherwise, other governments will be represented virtually. They include countries in the Indo-Pacific and Asia. For example, Australia, South Korea and Japan are expected to attend, as well as countries from the Middle East and even Latin America. Now, the Élysée says that it's important that some of these countries who are participating have the ability to influence either the Iranians or the United States. The United States, who I must say will not be present during this conference, though it is understood that the US will be briefed afterwards. Now, the Financial Times is also reporting that France has apparently rejected a British suggestion for NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission chief, to attend this meeting. But as you say, this is a purely defensive move led by the French and the British here. They say that this effort to restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz can only be done once there is a full ceasefire in place.
Well, for more on this, we can speak to Basil Germond, a professor of international security at Lancaster University. Professor, thank you for speaking to Paris Direct. First of all, I want to know what you make of this. These are sideline nations that are in themselves, in a way, sidelining the United States and NATO to try to come up with a post-war plan. Do you think anything beneficial will come of this?
Well, it's a very important initiative indeed, because, like you said, it's about thinking of the post-war context. It's about thinking, how can we restore freedom of navigation in the longer term in the Strait of Hormuz? And that's very important, because that's what matters to make sure that we have free flow of traffic through the strait. So it's thinking about the future. Now, the extent to which this initiative will have an impact on the peace negotiation now between Iran and Tehran, that's a different question.
Yeah, and when we say freedom of navigation, how are we defining it? Are there going to be any limits to it? What is the details of that?
Well, freedom of navigation means that commercial shipping should be allowed, according to international law, to transit freely the choke point, which is the Strait of Hormuz. So the objective of France, the UK, and all the other nations involved in this initiative is to come back to the situation we had before the war, that is to say, full freedom of navigation across the strait, because that's key to the global economy at the moment. And the problem we have with oil prices, etc., is all down to those restrictions of traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. So it's all about free flow of traffic.
And the point that they're underlining here is that this is purely defensive. But what happens in case there is an incident where they do have to react? Are there going to be troops there? Are there going to be warships there? What are the rules of engagement? How do they define when or how to engage?
So what we can expect is that when a naval force will be deployed, if it happens in the Strait of Hormuz, they will be there to protect commercial shipping. So the idea is that it will happen in a post-war context. So normally there should not be attacks on commercial shipping, let alone on those warships stationed in the Gulf. But if there is an attack, for example, against commercial shipping, the aim of that force will likely be to try and intercept drones, missiles, or anything that could be dangerous for commercial shipping.
Yeah, and we've seen Donald Trump, not, I guess we could say, ignore allies, ignore international organizations, pull out of international organizations. So if the U.S. is monitoring this meeting but not taking part in it, do we have any idea if the Trump administration would agree to what might be decided? Again, you say it's post-war. We're not there yet. But do we have any idea that the Trump administration would adhere to whatever they come up with?
That's an interesting question, because on the one hand, the Trump administration wanted European nations to do something. So now the Europeans are trying to do something. Will it play in favor of the Trump administration at the negotiation table? That's a different question, because in a sense, the Europeans and their partners are at the moment putting pressure also on Trump to find a solution to have a proper peace agreement. Because with those talks currently taking place in Paris, the idea is that we need to move from ceasefire to proper peace agreements, so as then we can step up and try and help restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait. It's putting pressure on the Trump administration, and obviously President Trump doesn't like when that happens. But I think they can be a bit more clever and actually use this initiative at the negotiation table to tell Tehran that now there is a third party able to take over those questions of freedom of navigation and security in the Gulf. So that could be a card that the Trump administration might play if they decide to play it in a clever way.
Yeah, they're clear echoes to the coalition of the willing. When Britain and France led a similar initiative for the war in Ukraine. Will this group do anything differently? Did they learn anything from that process that they might say, hey, we need to take this into account and do something differently than what we did in that scenario?
Well, I think there's what has changed now with the Iran war. It's that Europeans have really understood that there's been a lack of investment in being prepared to defend our countries and national interest. And the problem that we will face when we will try and launch a mission like a naval operation in the Gulf, we will have to divert a lot of resources that we have here, like air defense destroyers, etc. Whereas here we are facing the Russian threat, including hybrid warfare in our borders. So I think it's a wake-up call for Europeans that we have to think in terms of the resources we have, be ready to deploy them when needed, but to really invest into our future defense, because it can't continue like that. We need to step up.
Basil, thank you very much for your time. Basil Germond, professor from Lancaster University. Thank you.